When I first saw this deal that Josh Donaldson signed with the Braves, I was pretty surprised because I'd been following the Josh Donaldson free agency pretty heavily, and I did not see the Braves as any potential landing spot for him. Um, and and it shocked me to see him go to the Braves, especially since I know that the Braves have quite a bit of depth at third base and already an elite team in the NL. But as we look at his contract was a one-year deal worth $23 million. Originally, I was shocked to see him get this much money. But as you look at players with similar deals, such as Chris Davis, Jason Hayward, you see that this $23 million contract range is very risky. It's a high risk. It's a high risk investment to pay a player this much money because you're investing a large part of your future and a lot of financial capital into this one player. And if this one player doesn't work out, then you are left reeling. A perfect example of this is Chris Davis. He is on a massive contract right now with the Orioles and has arguably been the least valuable player in baseball over the past couple of years. Noticeably in 2018, he was awful. I think he hit like 150 for I don't even know how many home runs. And then you look at a franchise player like Joey Votto, who is an MVP candidate every year, well deserving of the $23 million. And that's just a success story from this price range. And Jason Hayward has been a mixed bag for Chicago. He left St. Louis to go to Chicago on $23 million a year, and has really been disappointing in Chicago. And I don't think I'm alone in saying that his defense has regressed quite a bit, and his offense just has not been the same since he left Atlanta. But at the same time, both Chris Davis and Jason Hayward were long-term deals. What we're looking at here with Josh Donaldson is a one-year deal, and I personally think that's a very smart move by Atlanta. I think everybody figured he was going to get a one-year deal anyway, so it's not surprising to see that happen. I was just a little surprised at the price point to see it happen at $23 million. Somewhere in the expensive range, but only 1 year. It doesn't restrict you in any way. Next year in free agency, they can still continue to pursue him. But as we move on to look at Josh Donaldson's statistics, in 2015, you look at the elite tier statistics. 297 average, 41 home runs, led the majors in RBIs that year at 123. When you see that, you see why Atlanta is willing to bet on his a comeback year for him, because you see. You look at the offensive WAR, 7.4 in 2015, pretty much the same, and 7.3 in 2016. And then you see in 2017 he gets hurt, has a calf injury early on in the year. You see he plays about 40 games fewer, and his WAR drops 3. And then you see in 2018, this past year, he only played 52 games, got traded, only 1.2 WAR. And so in his full seasons, his offensive WAR has been elite. And he's been very deserving of the MVP candidate, of being a top-tier third baseman. Top tier, with Manny Machado, with Nolan Arenado, the best of the best in the majors. And so it makes a lot of sense to bet on his bounce-back year. He is getting older, and as he gets older, the injury problem could potentially get worse. But one thing that is slightly concerning, two things that are slightly concerning about his statistics here. You do see a noticeable drop in power every year since 2015. You go from 41 in 2015, down to 37 in 2016, down to 33 in 2017, even though that wasn't a full season for him. And then in 2015, in 52 games, he hit just 8 home runs. that's not the Josh Donaldson that we're used to seeing. And it's not the Josh Donaldson I think we'll see in the future. Because at the same time, when his home runs have been declining, so is his average. And I don't think that those will both continue to decline. I think one of them will, at least one of them will regain it, and it'll probably be his home runs because he has a lot of raw power. He's very talented in power. But the other thing that is concerning when you look at his statistics is that defensive WAR over there on the very far right. In 2015, 1.5, so just no better than average. But then you see in 2016 and 2017, he gets down closer to 0, and in 2018 he hits 0. And so he's playing at an average at best defense. He obviously in the past few years has made up for that. He's more than made up for that with his offense. But as he continues to age, that defense will probably decline more. And so he might become more of a defensive liability on the field. And playing in the hot corner, it's a very important defensive position. That's why you see people like Nolan Arenado and like Manny Machado, who are excellent defensive third basemen, get all this praise. Because at third base, it's a very hard place to play. And there's a lot of intricacies that come with the position. And having a player that knows those and can work with those and excel at that position is very important. But you'll see as we move over to the third base situation, you might be thinking, well, let's just have Donaldson move over to first base. He's not a great defender. First base is the easiest position on defense. But then you have to remember, the Braves have Freddie Freeman, who finished 4th in MVP voting last year. And so a move across the diamond over to first base is highly unlikely. And so when you see something like that, that defensive decline, it is concerning. And they are an NL team, so no DH spot for Donaldson. But as we look at the third base situation, now that we know that a switch over to first base is not likely, I won't say it's impossible, but very highly unlikely. You see that their current starter, I guess Donaldson will be their current starter this year, but their starter in 2018 was Johan Camargo. He's only 25 years old, only been in the majors for 2 years, and if you look at his stat line here, it's rather impressive. A 2.72 average, 19 home runs, 76 RBIs, and you see that offensive WAR at the 3 mark. Those are solid numbers, and at only 25, you can only imagine that those are going to go up as he reaches the prime of his career. And you look at his defensive WAR at 1.1, his defense will most likely improve. Remember, he's only been in the majors for 2 years. And so Donaldson will be a defensive downgrade at third base, but will most likely provide an offensive boost. But then you look at this guy on the right here, Austin Riley. He's the third baseman in AAA for the Braves, and he's 21 years old, and he's the number 3 Braves prospect, and ranked as the number 43 overall MLB prospect. And so obviously a very talented player. And you see at 25 and 21, the Braves have 2 very young, very talented third basemen, and a potential franchise player here in Austin Riley. And his projection was that he was going to reach the majors in 2019, so this coming season. But with Donaldson, that seems unlikely. So I think it's fair to say that Austin Riley is the future of the Braves' third base position. Johan Camargo, I think he will be a great MLB player. But I just don't think he'll be that for the Braves, because you see this Austin Riley coming up, and you see the amazing potential that a player like him has. I just don't see Johan Camargo fitting with the Braves, and if you have to see that Johan Camargo doesn't fit with the Braves for too much longer as Austin Riley comes up, then Donaldson clearly does not fit long term with the Braves. Um, I think for I think everyone that sees this 1 year deal, I don't think that the Braves are going to try to sign him long term. Maybe if he has a comeback season and plays at an MVP level again, then why wouldn't they? But I don't think he'll play at that MVP level again. And when you have a prospect like this, coming up, you don't want to block him. You want to let him have room to grow and to develop fully into the player that he will be and can be in the future. So you see this 1 year deal, and it's very obvious that it is a short term solution. As we look at the pros here, it's a low risk but with a very high potential. You look at this Braves team, one of the youngest in the majors last year, but also a team that excelled, won the NL East, made the playoffs, beat the Dodgers in a game. The Braves, of course, always would like to see a more competitive series, but and that's why they bring in Josh Donaldson. I think maybe that Braves team that was so young, with players like Ronald Acuna and Ozzie Albies, so young. You bring in a player like Donaldson, a guy who's been around. He's played in Oakland, he's played in Toronto. He brings that veteran presence on a young team that is necessary in order to have sustained postseason success. But you look at that 1 year deal, and all of this comes back to the 1 year deal and the solid potential that the Braves have at third base and the solid future that they have. Donaldson isn't needed longer than this year. And if you are betting on him to come back and return to that 2016 level where he's has over 7 offensive WAR, you're looking at instantly one of the most valuable players in baseball on a team that's already young, that's already elite, and at the same time he can be mentoring that young team, showing them how it's done. And so I think that this contract makes a lot of sense. Originally I didn't see it. It didn't make sense to me. Why the Braves would do something like this. Because I looked at his contract and I saw that it was on the expensive side. But then as I really delved deeper into the contract, and I thought about it, I researched it, I realized they don't need Donaldson as a long-term solution. They're not necessarily trying to sign him long-term. And if he does have a bounce-back year, immediately the Braves are elite. They're up there with the Red Sox, with the Astros. Because he provides such an impact bat. The thing that the Braves were missing in the NLDS against the Dodgers last season. That veteran, that guy to get them over the hump, to propel that team, to give that team, grit and fight and determination. And that's what they need, and that's what they have here in Donaldson. And so I like the Braves to return to the postseason, especially after this trade. But I think this will be one of the most interesting stories in the near future in baseball. Does Donaldson have a comeback year this next year? And if he does, are we looking at a long-term contract for him? Because remember, he is getting old. Will teams still be willing to bet on him maintaining that MVP discussion, that MVP caliber play? At 32, soon to be 33, he's reaching the age where power hitters tend to decline the sharpest. As you see with players like Chris Davis. And so, will teams be willing to take the risk on him? That I don't know. The Braves, with this low risk, high reward deal for 1 year, $23 million, makes a lot of sense, and I love this deal for the Braves. And I really think this deal will work wonders for the Braves and really propel them, closer to that World Series. Every team needs one breakout player. to get them over the hump. And I think Donaldson very well could be that for the Braves.